Did you know there are ways that you can increase your success rate with fasting? Now, hold on, even if you don't fast, you're going to find something within these tips that you can apply. So if you're not ready for fasting or feel that it's not for you, that is totally fine. But I want you to listen on because I'm going to give some advice as far as meal timing and exercise that you can implement whether or not you're fasting. Welcome to the Forever Fit with Carol Cavino podcast. I'm your host, Carol Cavino. I'm a fitness and health coach for women over the age of 40 who are struggling with perimenopausal and menopausal hormonal symptoms. I help them to lose the body fat for good and to tone and to strengthen their bodies. So let's talk about fasting. I have quite a few episodes where I have touched on intermittent fasting, and that's not the purpose of today's episode, but let me give just a quick definition of how I define intermittent fasting. So there's fasting, there's intermittent fasting. Some people say they're completely entirely different things. I use them interchangeably. Sometimes I think we get so hung up on terms that we just forget to be human beings and discuss things with people in terms that everyone can understand. Another one, this is a side note, nothing to do with intermittent fasting, but people get all hung up over the word tone and muscle tone. I think it's silly to get hung up on that because basically we're all talking about the same thing. But a lot of times with women, that's the very first way that we think of muscle. We don't think of the word muscle, we think of the word being toned or defined. And so you got to meet people where they're at. What does it matter what we call it? Whether we call it sculpted, lean muscle, it doesn't matter. We're all on the same page here. So let's get back to the topic at hand. How can we increase intermittent fasting benefits? Intermittent fasting is, in my mind, time restricted eating, and it's generally not extended fast. Now, I use a couple of extended fast in the IF 45 program that I teach, but I give plenty of modifications and choices. And it's not something I recommend doing all the time. It's a once in a while thing to increase autophagy, which is your cellular benefits, where your cells take out the trash, which we want, especially with cognition in our brain. So it is time restricted eating or feeding, and you have a fasting window and you have a feeding window. Now, what I love about the way that I teach it and I love about IF 45 is it's flexible. Your fasting window could be 12 hours and your feeding window 12 hours. Your fasting window could be 14, it could be 16. I generally recommend not going beyond 16 unless you're doing a once in a while extended fast. So go beyond that number if you're a woman, unless it's a once in a while thing. That is my viewpoint based on working with over 1,000 women over the past decade. And also with the science research that I've looked into for women. I'm currently writing a book. It's not an intermittent fasting book. It is really a book about perimenopause and the years beyond and transitioning to menopause. But we just tend to do better as women when we have a fast that is more moderate. And the reason being is we can't get our nutrients into too short of a feeding windows. If we only have one meal a day, we can't get our protein in. We can't get our healthy fats. We can't get enough fiber. It's too difficult. Even the micronutrients are too difficult to get. So that is a brief description of intermittent fasting. And in my view, anybody can find a version. So what are the things that make the effects greater? Number one is going to be exercise, and particularly resistance training. The resistance training actually extends your fast and increases the autophagy window. That's a mouthful. It extends your fasting period So thus it extends your autophagy benefits. So we talked briefly about autophagy. Autophagy is a process that typically happens in more of an extended fast and only happens when you're intermittent fasting, restricting that feeding for that period of time. You give yourself a break and you give your body a chance to rejuvenate the cells, in particular the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cell. Mitochondria are actually, yeah, they're powerhouses, but they're very sensitive. They are sensors. They sense everything from alcohol to fatigue to toxins. They're very sensitive. So we want to keep them as healthy as possible, and we want to get rid of what they call dead or zombie cells, which can potentially become cancer. So this process occurs in autophagy. It occurs when you're fasting. However, you can extend that benefit with strength training. So if you're strength training, and this is just an example, don't quote me, it's not an exact one. And let's say your typical fast is 16 hours, but you do 14 one day and you do strength training. You can actually still get the benefit of a 16-hour fast. Let's say you fast 12, you could get the benefit of a 14 or 15-hour fast. So even though you're not fasting that long, you're getting the benefit because of the strength training, the resistance training. Number two is timing of your fast. So all fasting, all intermittent fasting, in my opinion, is beneficial as long as it's done correctly. And correctly doesn't mean a set of rules. It means listening to your body, listening to your energy levels, your sleep levels, and your stress levels. If you've had 1 hour of sleep, probably not the day to go into a 16-hour fast or a 24-hour fast. It's not a good idea. Your hunger signals are through the roof. You're headachy, you're tired, you're irritable. Save it for another day. So we don't want to be dogmatic with fasting. I take days off. But timing of your fasting is important. Now, this timing will help you even if you don't fast. And the research is stating that a fast that begins in the early evening is more effective than if it starts, say, at 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. So the earlier you start your fast, like late afternoon, early evening is ideal, like 5, 6, the better the benefits. So they did a research study and they increased, in one group, they increased their dietary intake by 600 calories. Well, both groups. One group was a group that ate late at night, and one group was a group that ate earlier in the evening and then started their fast. They didn't eat, snack, anything up until bedtime. So they ate, finished at say 5, 6 o'clock, and that was it for that day until the next day. The group that stopped eating sooner and started their fast sooner did not gain weight from the extra 600 calories. The group that ate late gained weight. We are less insulin sensitive as we go through the day. Our insulin sensitivity is greatest in the morning and it's the least amount at night. And it really makes sense with our circadian rhythms because once the sun goes down, our body is designed to relax, stop eating, unwind, and go to bed. So if we keep eating, we're going against that circadian rhythm. It will affect our heart rate or heart rate variance even. It will affect our sleep, our REM sleep, and our deep sleep. And then, of course, it can cause weight gain by causing cravings. But if you eat too late at night, and let me verify the last thing I said. I just realized I misspoke a little bit. So let me back up. So if you eat late at night, you eat that 600 calories, you go right to bed, it's 10 o'clock at night, and your sleep is trash, and you don't have enough REM, and you don't have enough deep, and maybe you wake up during the night because your cortisol is too high from eating too late. You've had a poor night's sleep. Now, the next day, your cravings are going to be through the roof and you're prone to weight gains. I needed to make that full connection of what happens all the way through. So these are the reasons they believe that people gained weight with that 600 calories at night, but not earlier in the day. Number 3 is something that I touched on last week. but it bears mentioning again because it's that important. And that is insulin resistance in the muscles. That is the first place. So when we get that adipose tissue, fat tissue, we lose muscle, which is sarcopenia. We start to get insulin resistant. And it starts first within your muscles, and they believe it starts first within the legs. So to make your fasting more effective, you want to make sure that you're consuming the correct amount of protein for your body and your goals in your feeding window. A big mistake that I see, big, big, big. I just had a woman write me the other day. She says, intermittent fasting doesn't work for me. And when I asked her a few questions, because I was curious, does it really not work? Do you really not like it? Or is there something else? I found out that she wasn't eating enough in her feeding window. She was over fasting and she was over exercising. So it was heavy caloric restriction. She wasn't getting the protein. She was eating the wrong things in that feeding window, way too low with protein. She wasn't honoring nights where she had poor sleep or high stress or low energy. She just kept on plowing forward with this extreme fast. We must have enough to eat within that feeding window. Now you can work out fasted. I get that question all the time. But there are a few rules for this. You need to make sure that the day before, the night before, that your dinner had excellent macros. You had quality protein and enough of it. You had lots of veggies. You had the right amount of fats and fiber. And if you did have a carb, it was one that didn't spike your blood sugar. Balanced macros. You wake up the next morning, you do your fasted workout, you're fine. You have the nutrients that you need. But if you over fasted, only ate one meal that day, and didn't have enough protein, guess what? You are going to feel weak and shaky and headachy in the morning. So we need that protein in order to keep the muscle and build the muscle. And then, of course, next up is the strength training. We need to focus. We need whole body strength training, but we need a very big focus on the lower body, on the legs. A mistake that I see a lot of men make in the gym, and you've seen them too, the chicken skinny legs and then the overdeveloped chest and shoulders and sometimes no neck because they're so far into their front deltoid of the shoulder, the front part of the shoulder, from doing too many chest presses that it's changed their posture, a little bit bent over. We don't want that. We want balance in the muscles. We want to work them in a way that is congruent and balanced. We want a solid plan. We don't want to wander around the gym not knowing what we're doing. And then we want that focus on the lower body. And I see a lot of guys, they're starting to get it. I'm seeing guys and young guys too do glute hip thrust. And guys always did squats, but you wouldn't see them very often doing an isolation exercise for the glutes or the legs. You wouldn't see too many lunges. You wouldn't see them do that many hamstring curls or kickbacks or glute hip thrust. Now, I know the glutes aren't part of the legs, but when I'm saying lower body, I'm talking about the whole area, including the glutes. So once again, number one, exercise increases your autophagy window. So you get more of the benefit without having to fast more. You're getting more bang for your buck. Number two, the timing of your last meal should be earlier as opposed to later. Time the beginning of your fast earlier as opposed to later. And finally, number three, we first become insulin resistant in the muscles. This requires a twofold approach, actually three. Number one, make sure that you have enough protein, 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight in your feeding window. At least, ladies, get to 100 grams, at least. You can do that. And then number two is the strength training component, but be balanced, whole body. Number three, hit those legs and glutes with intensity because studies are showing you become insulin resistant first in the muscles, but absolutely first in the legs. So I have a couple of great free resources. You can head to the show notes and check those out. Be sure to follow me. I always forget to ask this, and I'm going to ask a very big favor. that you take the time, if you're not following me already, to follow me and shoot me a message and say, hey, I followed your podcast today, Carol. You can contact me on Instagram at Carol Covino Fitness. I also have my YouTube up and going. I do have my podcast up. There will be more material added other than the podcast over time. As I record this, I'm getting ready to fly to Rome. And so this is something I will be addressing when I come back from Europe. My husband and I are taking a Mediterranean cruise. We're going from Rome to Naples, Sicily, Turkey, and then Greece as well, the Greek Isles. Super excited. I will be back in a couple of weeks, but not missing one podcast. So the podcast will continue on every single week. So I am batch recording today, and I will be adding more to that YouTube channel in the future. So check it out. And once again, follow my podcast, message me. Lots of things I'm asking you to do today. But the main thing is your support means that this content reaches more women and even men that need to help the women in their lives. So until next time, wherever you are in the world, I wish you every blessing and bye for now.